I just spilled energy drink all over my lap. How's your day going? Hello. I feel like every single way to say hello has been taken by other YouTubers. So, hi, I guess. Welcome to the very first episode of Fall Fiction Free-for-All, where I discuss creepy content as well as do my makeup or a costume or a craft at the same time. I'm not really sure what I'll be doing every week, but we'll do other things while I talk because I like to keep my hands busy. In this very first episode of Fall Fiction Free-for-All, I will be discussing the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So if that tickles your fancy, go ahead and stick around. So I'm going to be doing a split makeup look today. This is actually my third time recording this video, so my previous efforts have been rather frustrated and frustrating, so I'm really hoping that this time works out because I don't want to do it again. A quick trigger warning that I forgot to mention before I started my foundation. The book, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, does contain subjects of murder and suicide, so if those are things that you are sensitive to, feel free to click off of this video and join us next week when we're talking about something a little less doom and gloom, because not all of these videos will be such dark subject matter as much as spooky subject matter, and then after Halloween, you know, back to the normal content. The book was published in 1885 by Robert Louis Stevenson and written while he was bedridden, and he actually was bedridden because of some complications from tuberculosis, which really messes you up for kind of your entire life. You can only moderately see a difference. That is the palest foundation that NYX has, at least in that line. When I say I am a ghost, I mean I am translucent, baby. All right, we're just gonna keep going with it. Okay. So Robert Louis Stevenson, he writes this book in 3 days, and then his wife comes to him and says, actually, this isn't worthy of you, and I don't like that you're writing an allegory and making it into a story. So he burned his manuscript and wrote it again in another 3 days, because this man was bedridden because of tuberculosis, right? That means he was on a lot of cocaine. Like a ton of cocaine. He was on drugs, that's why he wrote so fast. I think that the burning of the manuscript was like a little dramatic, but I have also deleted entire drafts because I hated them, so I can't really talk, I guess. Okay, so there's like a minor difference between this side and this side that I can see on camera. In real life, it's actually not as stark, so hopefully it comes across better on camera than in real life. We'll see. So if the lighting and angle look slightly different, it's because I had to take a pause because my neighbor decided that now was the perfect time to vacuum out his car, and my apartment does not filter noise. So we're gonna do a montage to cover up the sound of vacuuming. Ready? Here we go. He's still going. Must have a hell of a mess in his car. So, if you want to support me getting out of this apartment, subscribe! So it seems like things have quieted down a little, so I'm gonna keep talking. And if something happens in the background, I apologize, but unfortunately, my neighbors do not cater to my will, so there's that. Henry Jekyll is a doctor that lives in London in the 1880s, presumably it's contemporary to the time it was published, and he decides one day that he wants to separate the good side of his nature from the bad. We're not entirely sure why, but he wanted to see if he could do that, which speaks to a certain amount of hubris, I think. But, you know, maybe all doctors are just a little cocky. He does this through the use of a potion that he creates that separates each side of his nature, the angel from the fiend, as he puts it. Now, the book is actually told from a man called Mr. Utterson's perspective. Mr. Utterson is both Jekyll's lawyer and friend, and they have worked together for a very long time. And eventually, Jekyll loses control of Hyde, and Hyde begins to come out more and more often, unbidden, and becomes the more dominant persona. And unfortunately, in the end, he becomes the permanent persona. Mr. Utterson comes to visit Henry Jekyll because he is concerned for his friend because he's been looking very sick, and he's withdrawn from a lot of social situations, and he's not attending parties or giving to charity like he had been after he seemed to get a little better and then he got worse. So he goes to visit Dr. Jekyll, and then the servants are really freaked out, and they're saying that their boss has been either kidnapped or murdered or something bad has happened, but whoever is locked in Jekyll's study is not Dr. Jekyll. They know this for a fact. They know that Dr. Jekyll is quite tall and Mr. Hyde is quite short, and they don't know who it is in the study, but they know it's not their boss. So eventually Mr. Utterson and the head servant go to break down the door, and they find Mr. Hyde dead on the floor of apparent suicide. That's the quick summary of this book. Oh, also, yeah, Hyde murdered a man for, like, no apparent reason. While we think of it as a pretty simple story, at the time, no one had really done anything like that before. So to them, it was really impressive, and it's still a very impressive work. And I don't care what Robert Louis Stevenson's wife had to say about it. I thought it was really well written, and I am very thankful that he chose to write that. So, Fanny, that was rude. So in this set, I'm going in with a really, really dark eye pencil to kind of blend it out to a gray. I want this to look very sallow and just very pallid. I want to look very much not normal. So at the time, this book was actually really unprecedented, and we don't really think about it that way because it's been in our cultural memories for so long, but it's so beloved that it's actually inspired numerous adaptations. So personally, my first experience with this book was actually in The Page Master, and if you haven't seen that book, you are seen that book. If you haven't seen that movie, you're missing out, because what just a gem of a film from the 90s, honestly. Oh god, I forgot to contour my nose. So like I was saying, there have been a ton of other stories inspired by Jekyll and Hyde, including a musical and other movies. There have been numerous cameos by the character, including one in the 2017 Mummy, the one with Tom Cruise. He was played by Russell Crowe in that movie, which was really cool. I thought that Russell Crowe did a really good job with that. Unfortunately, the rest of the movie didn't do a good job with anything, so here we are. I just realized I never turned on my ring light after I restarted recording, so 1 second. Nothing's going right today, TBH. My neighbors are loud as hell. Like, I tripped on my light earlier. It's been a hard day. So, we've got... No. Speaking of nothing going right. So one of the things that inspired me to do this look was the fact that Jekyll is considered to be quite handsome, and Hyde just isn't. Hyde is described as being very ugly and inhuman in a way that words don't seem to be able to describe. So, like I said, Robert Louis Stevenson intentionally leaves the descriptions of Hyde extremely vague, and that's just because he wanted us to be able to fill in the blank. And it's actually really fascinating because, again, there's all this language surrounding Jekyll, but where's the description of Hyde? There isn't one, really. He's described as looking pretty inhuman and just quite frightening in general, and you can see it from a distance, and he seems to radiate this evilness about him. And so it was really fascinating to see that be portrayed so well through a lack of language rather than an overabundance of description. So this is where I get to have a lot of fun, because I don't get to do like a ton of really wild makeup looks in my day-to-day, just because it's not that I can't. It's largely just because I don't have anywhere to do them for, or like a reason to, and now I get to play, and that's really fun for me. You might have noticed that I'm using the term ugly a lot, and obviously beauty is very subjective, but the reason is that that is the way that Hyde is described, is that there is an ugliness about Mr. Hyde. There is a thing that Robert Louis Stevenson most likely believed in, and many other Victorians did as well, and this thing is called physiognomy. Now, physiognomy is the belief that your morality is tied to your beauty, so your moral and ethical worth is tied to the way that you look. This is extremely stupid, but it's not the only time in history that people have believed this. Physiognomy was the belief that your morality was tied to your looks, as I've said, but it also has extremely racist and ableist roots. I think it's important to talk about it because that isn't the truth, but it's also important to acknowledge it and know that that is where Robert Louis Stevenson was coming from. So even though we know that's not true, it does give a lot of context to the book. So now we're going to get a little nuts. I'm going to go under my brows and onto the sides of my nose with purple so that it, again, looks more sunken. Okay, so what were we talking about? Physiognomy. All right. So again, racist, ableist, dumb, but people believed it. So we have these motifs throughout the book where it's portraying good and evil through things like your looks, but it's also portrayed in motifs such as fog, and fog is really important throughout the book, and I think it's really interesting the way that he used the environment against the reader a little bit. Okay. Oh my god! I just spilled energy drink all over my lap. How's your day going? So that happened. I think this video is cursed because every time I try to film, something goes wrong. Today, it's that my neighbors are extremely noisy and I spill Monster Energy drink on myself, so I don't know what's going on. I don't know why the fates don't want me to do this, but I'm gonna do it anyway because I make my own destiny. So while my camera was off, I went ahead and did my lipstick and mascara since I can't talk and do those at the same time anyway. And yeah, we're gonna continue where I left off talking about fog because I do think that it is an important motif in the book and I don't want to not talk about it, and frankly I need something to talk about while I'm doing this next step. So the effect that I'm going for is I'm going to draw some veins on this side, and they're going to be branching outward as though they are taking over the rest of my face, as well as sort of branching this way. So I'm going to use the same palette that I was using before with this Jekyll and Hyde one, and I'm going to go in with a red first, and then I'm going to follow it up with a purple, and the goal is to make it so that right around my eye is the darkest color, and then it'll gradually fade out. So Robert Louis Stevenson knows that London is a naturally foggy area, and he uses this to his advantage and basically plays the audience against itself. Essentially, what we're seeing is when this fog rolls in and Mr. Hyde is more present, we don't really think about it because we just think that fog is just part of the natural environment. And using the environment when you're writing is actually a huge deal, and it's an extremely wise thing to do. Robert Louis Stevenson does this really well because when we see this fog, we assume again that it's a natural part of the environment, but what's happening is it is actually a representative of what Jekyll and Hyde are going through. There's a brilliant passage towards the end when Mr. Utterson is going to visit Hyde's house for the first time. As they're driving through the streets of London, the fog is starting to roll in and then it starts to recede again. He notices this because it's starting to obscure buildings and people, and then it'll fade away, and then a few minutes later it'll be back. And what's happening is this recession and reappearance of fog is representative of the struggle between Jekyll and Hyde. And Jekyll, who is trying desperately to contain Hyde, is no longer able to do so, and that is why the fog ultimately, as they reach Hyde's house, stays on the ground and ends up being a permanent fixture throughout the rest of the book. So that's the makeup, but I think that because I've worked so hard on this and because this video has been so cursed, I think this deserves a montage, so I'm going to pop on some lashes, change my clothes, do my hair, and we're gonna have spooky scientist time. I'll see you in just a minute. Okay, so that's it. I did it. This video was very cursed. Everything went wrong all of the time, but I freaking did it because I'm trying to keep my word of uploading every week. I know I didn't make it last week, so I apologize, but thank you for your patience. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as the bell icon to be notified of when I upload next, which should be next Friday. And go ahead and comment below what you think of Jekyll and Hyde and what you think of the makeup. And also go ahead and give this video a big like because it really helps me grow my channel, and I will see you next week. Goodbye. That's good Gatorade.